Hey everybody, it's Shizug and welcome back to these patch insights. Today we're looking at the November 21st patch of 2024 and we're going to be going over the big picture changes that happened in this update. We're going to be talking about the sustain rebalance, the anti-snowball measures that they've put in the game, the pacing of the game and the events that are going to be changing because of it, and also the matchmaking rework, and maybe some goodies at the end as well. All right everybody, let's get into it. First off, we have the sustain rebalance, the heal and anti-heal rework. Valve has decided to take every sustain ability and item in the game and make it slightly less effective across the board. So these are things like Abram's Lifesteal, Dynamo's Rejuvenating Aura, things even like Bullet Lifesteal and Spirit Lifesteal. Everything across the board had a reduction in the effectiveness to rejuvenate yourself, to heal yourself, and at a baseline, it's going to be worse and less effective. But also, alongside this, they also made the anti-heal items worse as well. So your Toxic Bullets are going to have less healing reduction, your Healbane's going to have less healing reduction, and also your Decay is as well. So to me, what this means is that by default, the sustain abilities, your Abrams's, your McGinnis's, they're going to have a harder time sustaining by default, and you're not going to need to itemize as heavily to counter them. It's not going to be essential to buy these anti-heal items to counter these heroes that are sustaining themselves forever. Valve's now given us the option to choose if we want to counter them and make their heal less effective, but at a baseline, it's going to be worse from the start. So you're definitely going to feel this on your heroes that rely on these rejuvenating kind of abilities. Your Abrams's, your Infernus's, your Shivs, they're going to have a harder time sustaining, and they're not going to force people to buy items to counter them as well. My gut says that this is a nerf for people who heal and sustain, and a buff for people who typically have to buy items to counter them. Getting into the next big section, there is now new anti-snowballing measures that Valve has added. I know a large complaint for the previous patch was that people were unhappy with the pacing of the game. They felt that games were too stompy, ending too early, and people provided their feedback in the right channels, and Valve listened, and they have made some adjustments to the game. So the most important part of this anti-snowballing piece is essentially that walkers got rebalanced heavily. Not only are walkers going to do more damage, now we're going to see that walkers deal 10% max HP as damage when they stomp. Their laser is going to do 2% max HP as DPS. They're going to provide allies bullet resist and spirit resist that are under the walker. It's going to be more easy to defend it as a whole. But additionally, this is the big part, walkers now have resistance based on how many nearby enemies there are. And you can see the scaling numbers. If there's only one person there, nothing has changed. But as the team groups up and goes to push a walker, the walker is going to have its own resistance on top of that. So these death ball metas where you felt like there was suddenly like 5 teammates and 1 split pusher grouped up on you, they were taking down your walkers, that's going to be heavily punished now because the walkers themselves are going to have resistance built in, and it's going to make it harder to take it. And additionally, the walkers are going to do more damage to attackers, and it's going to make it so that people who are attacking it are getting natural resistance and taking 25% less damage across the board. On top of all these things, specifically the middle lane walkers have got a buff in their HP. We see a number of 5,800 go up to 8,000 now, which is a huge difference. The side lane walkers have remained the same. They're 5,175. What this means though is that your side lane walkers are vulnerable still. They're still going to go down to split pushers. If there's one person showing up to hit a side lane walker, it's going to feel the exact same. But if a group of 5 takes the mid boss and then tries to run it down mid at one of your walkers, you're going to have a much easier time defending it with your stronger walker that's taking more resistance. It's resisting that damage. It's buffing you guys. And also now it has more HP to work with as well. Those middle walkers are truly going to be a lot harder to take down now. On top of these things, we just talked about if someone takes mid boss and runs it down mid, that's also going to be less effective now too. The trooper health bonus that was taken when you take mid boss, your troopers would be buffed up, they'd be stronger. Instead of being 95%, it's going to be 70% instead. They're going to be a little bit weaker in terms of health, not be as tanky to the opposing team. Valve reworked the respawn time curve, so in general, you're going to respawn a little bit faster in the mid game, so you're not going to have that one death and feel like your base disappears. And then speaking of your base disappearing, the flex slot that was awarded from taking all shrines has now been changed to 1 shrine and 2 base guardians. And then continuing along that path of your base dying, killing the first patron now causes any existing enemy hero respawns to be reduced by 20 seconds, but it doesn't reduce it past 10 seconds. So these 2 new changes to when the flex slot is awarded and also how the patron respawns you faster is going to give you a lot more to think about when going in and pushing the base. You can think about it a lot more fractionally now. I feel like a lot of the time, if you were taking the 2 shrines to get your slot, you kind of wanted to kill the patron on the way out anyway, but now you truly can make a play for 1 shrine and then leave the other one for later And then when you take the other one later, you drop the patron and then you back out. There's a lot more thinking that has to go into when you take the patron and how much of the base you want to take before backing to do something safe. It's a lot easier to claim that last flex slot now that it's 1 shrine and 2 base guardians. You're kind of taking the base guardians and then the shrines anyway. So reducing it to 1 shrine is going to be a lot easier to get that flex slot now. And additionally, talking about that first patron and getting that 20 seconds back to the other team, I think that's going to cause them to respawn collectively at the same time, and it's going to cause a second wave of a base defense that might not be as easy to take as compared to the first one. I think there's a really good case to taking the first patron and backing pretty consistently. I think that this 20-second advanced respawn timer is going to allow the opponents to have a more coordinated attack without them even knowing it, because it's going to cause a lot of timers of respawns to line up and match up and then cause for one last base defense where they're all up in time. And then building on that, if you want to back after taking that first patron, we now see that power-ups have been reworked. So your bridge buffs, they're now going to be worse in the early game, and they're going to scale up to become stronger later in the game. So these bridge buffs that were really, really strong at the 10-minute marker and then kind of petered off towards the end of the game, they didn't feel as impactful. Now they're going to be worse at the 10-minute marker, but they're going to be much stronger as the game goes on. So this kind of act of taking the first shell off the patron, backing up, getting the buff for your team, running the urn, and then going and taking the base again seems a lot more favorable. Those buffs are going to be worth a lot more. And then speaking of the buffs, now, instead of just standing on the bridge and collecting your buff, you now need to melee it as if it was like the Rejuvenator or something. There's now a buff crystal that sits on the bridge. You melee it, and then you're going to have the same parry shenanigans that go on with the Rejuve. The same thing's going to happen at the 10-minute marker, and those highly coordinated games where people camp the 10-minute runes. I think you're going to see the same thing happen in this game, and you're going to have that rock, paper, scissors game with like parry, punch, or yeah, you know. And then lastly, the thing that you might notice if you've played a game so far is that the matchmaking system has been reworked. So this strange rank system that we used to have where it was open for only a couple hours every day, and it was you would get your rank at the end of each week on a Tuesday, that has been done away with. And there's only one queue that you can go with right now. There's no unranked, there's no ranked. It is you play Deadlock and you're getting a rank at the end of every game. It's going to be updated as you go. Your badges are now going to update immediately after you play a game. There's no week-long wait to see what happens. And Valve has really leaned into hero MMR and has even displayed it on your profile as well now. You can now see what your rank is and what your hero MMR is compared to that rank. Now there's going to be like a delta with an arrow saying, hey, you're really good at Haze and you're really shit at Infernus. And you're going to have a lot of comparison tools for your hero MMR, and it's going to be visible to you. Additionally, we now have leaderboards in the game. There's no more third-party system to try to figure out how you stack up relative to other people, but this is for the top 1,000. So all the streamers that have claimed rank 1 for all this time, now there is truly going to be one singular rank 1. So look for it in-game. You can find it on your profile tab on the right side. Some people in my stream chat were actually talking about how they didn't like this system when we went over the patch notes on Thursday. Also, every Thursday, when the patch notes drop, we're going to be live streaming them and going over every single line one by one in super detail. So if you want to join next for the live stream, you can either check out the VOD or follow on Twitch, sub on YouTube, and catch it live then. But some people didn't agree with the changes that Valve made to matchmaking. If you disagree with some of the changes, the best way that you can give feedback is not on Reddit, is not complaining on Discord, but rather on the forums. Let Valve know what you think about it and give some constructive feedback. This is a playtest, and Valve clearly highly values our opinions as playtesters, so let them know in a polite and constructive manner, and they will absolutely read it and keep it in mind. All right, everybody, I hope this equips you to play the next 2 weeks of Deadlock on this new meta, and I hope you go win some games and see your rank go up. All right, everybody, have a good one.